हेलो स्टूडेंट्स, आज हम बात करेंगे बहुत ही इम्पोर्टेंट टॉपिक इन research, that is research objectives. Okay, so in a previous lecture we have already discussed about research problem, and the next topic as we are discussing today is a research objective. Now the purpose of research is to discover the answer to the question through the application of scientific procedure. Okay, that is the one point. Now the main aim of research is to find out the truth that is hidden, on which there is no discovery yet. Okay, so basically when you talk about a research is a process where you start things with a difficulty. Okay, you formulate the research problem, and on the basis of the research problem you try to formulate your objectives. Objectives are nothing, these are the clear, concise, declarative statement that are expressed in the present tense. तो इतना हमें जरूर याद रखना पड़ेगा. These are the clear, concise, declarative statements. Okay, these are the clear, concise and declarative statement, and always being presented in the present tense. Okay. Now research objective should be closely related to the statement of the problem. Yes, research objective should always be in the alignment of your research problem. मतलब कि जो research problem है उसी problem के format में या उसी के alignment में आपका research objective होना चाहिए. Okay, in a subsequent slide we'll discuss that with one example as well. Okay, so actually what exactly it is something that what you want to achieve by the end of your study. तो रिसर्च ऑब्जेक्टिव्स आपको बताएंगे कि आपकी रिसर्च कहाँ से स्टार्ट हुई थी और एंड ऑफ द रिसर्च व्हाट यू हैव अचीव्ड इन दैट. Now the purpose of writing research objective, briefly we can just see the listed point. It is something that define the focus of your study. Like for example, if my statement is about factors affecting professionalism among nurse educators, so what would be my objective? Objective to determine the factors influencing professionalism among nurse educator. So it will make researcher more focused. They will be very clear to what they want to do. So focus. Second is clearly identify the variable to be measured. Okay, so your objective will have a objective will have your variables, and objectives will clearly will help you to understand what variable you need to measure. Like for example, in a previous example only, if it is about professionalism among nurse educators, so now the variable is professionalism. You want to measure the professionalism. So this is the variable. If suppose I want to conduct a study on prevalence of hypertension in that particular area, then prevalence of hypertension measurement will become my variable. It indicates various steps to be involved. How to do that? Establish and limit the study. Yes, because whenever you start a research inquiry, you have to limit your inquiry by putting certain boundaries, and somewhere your objectives will help you to put that boundary very clearly, because objectives will tell you what actually you need to attain by the end of this research. So for that reason it will make you limited. Okay, it will tell you what exactly you need to do and what you can avoid. Avoid collection of any data that is not necessary. That related to the previous point only, because sometimes I see if your study is about factors influencing professionalism among nurse educators, then your data will be related to the professionalism only. If your study is about finding the prevalence of hypertension, so your data is strictly about the measurement of hypertension or blood pressure. You are not going to ask other related things which is not a part of your research objectives. Now what are the criteria for good research objectives? एक अच्छे research objective में क्या क्या criteria होने चाहिए? पहली चीज should be concrete statement, है ना, describing what the researcher is trying to achieve. That should be very clear. Like for example, if my objective is to determine the correlation between the bad parenting with the bad children or the bad behavior of the children. Okay, so the term bad is the bad behavior is something that cannot be measured. Okay, so that is the point. the second point is achieved by undertaking the research. Okay, means it should be achievable. You cannot have an objective which cannot be attained, which cannot be achieved. Okay, there are sometimes, you frame a very vague objectives that is very difficult to achieve. Like for example, your objective is to change the personality traits of somebody after giving an intervention. So over a period of 30 days. So it is not achievable because you cannot change someone's personality after giving a single intervention, and that is in a very short time. So it is not achievable. Grounded in the problem statement, of course, so it should be alignment with your research problem only. Okay, so presented clearly, concisely, logically, and linked conceptually. So whatever conceptual definition you have, you should always have a logic in describing your objective. If I say that there is a relationship between the height of father and height of son, so there should be conceptual understanding of that. So your objective your objective must be logically connected. The variables that involved in the research objective should be clearly stated. It should be comprehensive, or different aspect of the research problem you identify, clearly phrased in operational term. Okay, so whenever you frame an objective, it should always have an operation. What do you mean by operational? Means it should be concrete or measurable format. Like for example, if I want to assess someone's let's say intelligence or academic intelligence, so what I have to, how will I make it operational? Maybe I'll just say in that way, a score on particular test. So this become operational. Okay, so whenever you frame an objective, it should always have the variables which are at measurable level. Okay, attainable, of course, the same related to the what we have discussed here. It should be achieved, so it should be attainable within the expected time frame or available resources for the time study. Now let's discuss some of the important characteristics one by one. Now first one is specific. The objective must be specific. Now specific objective, let's see the example. To determine the correlation between the parents' personality characteristics and their children's moral development. Now this is a very specifically we have described the objective. Now just look at the second one, that is what is a vague objective here. To determine the correlation between the bad behavior of the children with their parents. Now the problem here is a bad behavior, because whenever you say about a bad behavior, it is something that culturally defined. It may vary and very subjective from person to person. So what we can do, this is not a measurable one. This is not a specific. This becomes a specific, because I am saying between the parents' personality characteristics. Okay, what personality characteristics or traits the parents have and their relation with the moral development of the children. So as you can see, the bad behavior is not as specific, and that is replaced with the moral development, or the bad behavior of the parents is replaced with the parental personality. Second important one is the measurable. Okay, that is the objective must be measurable. Let's see with example. First, let's see what is not measurable and what is measurable. To evaluate the effectiveness of assertive training program among nursing students. Now this is a very commonly stated objective you find in most of the thesis. People will write to evaluate the effectiveness of assertive training, and if you look at this, there is nothing wrong in this particular objective. But the problem is it is not measurable, because you have to define this effectiveness very specifically. It is not measurable. So okay, so let's say how we can frame it in a better way. Measurable. To evaluate the relative means comparative effectiveness of the assertive training program in terms of post-test score comparison of assertive behavior on 30th day of the intervention among the nursing students in experimental and comparison group. Now you can compare both the objectives here. So the second one is not measurable, this is measurable, because as you can see there is a comparison. They are talking about how to see the effectiveness in terms of score comparison, among whom comparison among the two groups. On which date? On 30th day of the intervention. So this is a time bounded, this is very specific, this is measurable. Next one is attainable. Objective must be attainable. Now, what is not achievable objective? First, let's focus on this. To determine the change in the personality traits after telephonic counseling of the parents with the suicidal tendencies. हम ये बोल रहे हैं कि after giving a telephonic counseling to a suicidal patient or patient having suicidal tendency, we expect there would be a change in their personality traits. But as you know, this particular variable, traits of personality, is enduring one that cannot or do not change with one telephonic counseling. But you can conduct such researches. So what is the achievable objective of the same scenario? See, to determine the effectiveness of telephonic counseling in terms of reduction of suicidal impulses among the patient with suicidal tendencies. Now, this is not achievable that with a one counseling you can change someone's personality. Yes, but one thing is attainable, that is with a telephonic counseling you can reduce the suicidal impulses or tendency among the patients. So that become an achievable one. Okay, so the next is relevancy. Okay, so if you look at the relevancy for this particular statement, a study to describe the prevalence of domestic violence among women in a particular locality. This is what you want to study. Now, what is your irrelevant objective, or just see the relevant objective? To describe the prevalence of domestic violence among women in a particular locality, simply, as it is just a reflection of your problem statement. But if suppose someone want to do this kind of objective, to describe the perceived body image and autonomy among the women in a particular locality. Now, in this particular case, perceived body image, why we want to study this body image? Why we want to study their autonomy? Okay, these may be the variables associated with the domestic violence. But as my statement is clearly saying, I just wanted to know the prevalence of domestic violence, nothing else. So in this particular case, this objective become irrelevant for me. Okay, so this is a relevancy. Next, the last point here is a time oriented. Okay, the objective must be time oriented. So what is time oriented? As you can see, to evaluate the relative effectiveness of assertive training program in terms of post-test score comparison of assertive behavior on 30th day of the intervention among nursing students in experimental control group. यहाँ पे बहुत clearly हमने बताया है कि we want to see the effectiveness of the intervention in a given time. What is the time? 30th day of the intervention. Intervention देने के 30 days के बाद में या 30th day पे हम ये देखना चाहते हैं. तो सेकेंड वाला एग्जाम्पल है, द सेम सिनेरियो में यहाँ पे क्या लिखा हुआ है? टू एवेलुएट द रिलेटिव इफेक्टिवनेस ऑफ द असर्टिव ट्रेनिंग प्रोग्राम इन टर्म्स ऑफ पोस्ट टेस्ट स्कोर कंपैरिजन ऑफ असर्टिव बिहेवियर among nursing students in experimental and control groups. So what is the problem with this? There is no time limit. Okay, even though you see that many objectives are being presented without having a time oriented, but it would be good if you have that time bounded objectives. Okay, so these are some of the important characteristics of the or you can say feature of this objectives. First, I said should be specific. Second, it should be measurable. Third is attainable. Fourth one is relevant. Fifth one is time oriented. Okay, so these are the very important point. Now the next and bit controversial topic, what are the types of objectives? Okay, so objectives can be general or specific. ये बहुत बार बोला जाता है, objectives can be general or specific. So I personally say that objectives can never be a general one. Objective कभी भी जनरल नहीं होता, because objective का feature ही यही होता है, it should be specific, it should be attainable, it should be measurable, it should be relevant. So if something is very specific, then you cannot make it a general objective. अगर आप कभी भी एक general objective बनाएंगे तो वो measurable ही नहीं होगा. Okay, that you can say it's the aim of your research or something. So as for me, there is no type of objectives. Objectives are just a specific one. Now there's another important point, wording of the research objectives. Research objective की क्या wording होती है, मतलब किस तरह के words आप research objective में किस तरह की verb आप use करें. So there are two categories, strong verbs that is always desirable versus the weak verbs जो आपको नहीं use करनी चाहिए. Strong verb में like always say to compare, say to calculate, to assess, to determine, to verify, to describe, to explain, etc. These are the strong verbs. So whenever you frame your objective should have these kind of verbs. Whereas the verbs that you need to avoid, okay, that you need to avoid while doing it, okay. So like to appreciate, to understand, to believe, okay, to study. So all these are the verbs that you need to avoid because it is difficult to evaluate whether they have been achieved. So avoid these kind of verbs, okay, please avoid that. Like as you can see, to appreciate, अब ये बहुत ही quality वाला word है appreciate करना. To understand, at what level of understanding? To believe, so believe is also not, it's not measurable. So ये वाली verbs हमें नहीं use करनी चाहिए इसके ऊपर. Now, effective verbs used to construct the research objective. अगर आपके like if you go with the different categories like, okay, so if your objectives are related to the assessment of knowledge, use the word like to relate, to define, to describe, to identify, to indicate. For the application, just to apply, to demonstrate, to measure, okay, to illustrate. For analysis purpose, to to appraise, to analyze, identify, okay, deduct, measure. For comprehension, assess, compare, classify, predict, understand. For evaluation, to determine, like to determine the effectiveness, measure, project, evaluate, compare. And if your objective about synthesis, for qualitative, then you say like to construct, to create, to compose, to develop, integrate, formulate, to narrate. So all these are the effective verbs as per the requirement of your objectives. So that is all about the how to frame the research objective. So if I sum up the entire thing, research objective is nothing, it is a clear, concise, declarative statements about the outcome of your research. And whenever you talk about a research objective, it should be in a close alignment with your research problem. आपकी जो research problem है उसमें जो भी वेरिएबल्स हैं उन वेरिएबल्स को का रिफ्लेक्शन आपके ऑब्जेक्टिव्स होने चाहिए. और व्हेनेवर यू फ्रेम ऑब्जेक्टिव्स, ऑब्जेक्टिव मैंने आपको बताया है वो बहुत ही स्पेसिफिक होने चाहिए. ओके, इसमें एक नेमोनिक्स आती है SMART. ओके, आप मुझे इसका फुल फॉर्म पता करके बताइए और कमेंट बॉक्स में जरूर लिखिएगा कि SMART स्मार्ट ऑब्जेक्टिव का क्या मतलब होता है. ठीक है, सो दैट्स ऑल अबाउट द ऑब्जेक्टिव्स.